Welcome to Left, Right, Center, where we are covering Colorado politics. First on CBS News Colorado. I'm political specialist Shaun. Joining me, our analyst, Republican Dick Wadhams, Democrat Mike Dino. A new attack ad has created quite an uproar in the Denver mayor's race, which, to be honest, has been a bit of a sleepy affair. The ad by a super PAC supporting Kelly Brough accuses Mike Johnston of lying about his role in the state's COVID testing program and gun control. I gave the ad a reality check and found it to be misleading at best. So, Dick, it's the most controversy we've seen in this race. And, you know, the PAC and the campaign, by law, they're not allowed to coordinate. Still, given the bad press around this, how much does this hurt Brough?
I don't think it helps her. And there is a separation by law. And so she cannot be held accountable for the ad. And that's the problem with our campaign finance system, Shaun, is that this stuff does splash back on the candidate it's allegedly trying to help. And I don't think it's fatal, but I do think that it has an air of desperation to it as well. That this late in the campaign, that it suggests that she thinks she's behind, and her supporters think we've got to tar and feather Mike Johnston.
She could have denounced it, and she didn't.
She didn't. That's true. You can denounce ads, and you
but
can.
They rarely do.
And you can demand that they take it off. They don't have to.
Right. Well,
didn't happen.
Speaking of that, Johnston did file a cease and desist to have that ad removed from the air, but it hasn't been. It's still airing. And so, how much does this hurt him?
I'm not sure how much it hurts him, and certainly negative advertising in the mayor's race hasn't always had much of an effect, as Dick pointed out. Interestingly enough, Mike Johnston's super PAC went over $4 million in terms of money it spent in this campaign for both the general and the runoff. Bloomberg gave him $500,000.
Holy cow.
And so, and his independent PAC was up early with positive stuff about him. So I don't think it hurts him because he's had more ammunition about what he stands for. So my suspicion is he'll be in good shape.
Well, perhaps no issue has dominated the Denver mayor's race more than homelessness, and Johnston is running 2 ads about his plan to end homelessness in 4 years.
Running for mayor, Mike Johnston has a detailed plan to fight homelessness, building additional housing units, along with necessary drug treatment, mental health, and job training services.
I gave that ad a reality check, too. And while Johnston has a detailed plan, it relies on land and funding he has not secured, not to mention neighborhood buy-in. So, Mike, according to the National Institutes of Health, I actually looked this up. Homelessness has been a national issue since, would you believe it, 1870. So people have been trying to end homelessness for, what, more than 150 years?
Yeah.
But Johnston, he's going to do it in 4 years. Right.
So, Shaun, you only have to go back 20 years to 2003 when John Hickenlooper said he was going to end it in 10. He created an office, the Road to End Homelessness. And it's 20 years later. It is a tough issue. Both candidates are very sincere. Let's be clear about that. They do want to end it. It's just that giving voters and then, of course, citizens expectations that you can do it in a short amount of time, that's not going to work for you.
Does he think that they actually buy that, though? Really? You know, that you can end it in 4 years?
I think people buy the intention. And in some ways, to get through the noise of the campaign, you have to exaggerate.
I suppose. So, Dick, former mayoral candidate and state representative Leslie Herod said Johnston's homeless plan is one of the reasons that she endorsed him. But at a debate this past week, Kelly Brough said Herod came to her, asked for the endorsement, but said in exchange for that, she wanted a top-level job.
Right.
So when Johnston was asked, Johnston said, nope, didn't ask me for any job. You buy it?
No. And I don't think Mike is lying, but I think that you know that there was a quid pro quo there, that I'll endorse you, but I really would like to work in your administration. Now, I don't think Mike's lying, but former candidates do this in situations like this. They do, and they ask for things. And so I believe Kelly Brough when she says that there was an ask and she said no. Of course, she can say that easily because she didn't get the endorsement. But this, I don't.
So what Johnston said, maybe, probably. How often does this happen even?
Well, Mike would be better to ask that because he can.
You know, one thing
because he agrees to this.
Yeah, that's right.
One thing that's more prevalent is if you have a campaign debt. I mean, that's what I know. Dick and I are used to that part. If somebody comes to you and says, "I spent $150,000 too much, and I didn't win. Can you help me out with my debt?" And I think we'll see some of that too.
And by the way, that does happen, Shaun.
Yeah,
and there's I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Yeah.
That what I've said to candidates I've been involved in defeating is we'll help you after the election.
Yeah.
We're not going to do it before. Yeah. Some of them come in and they say, "Could you help us raise money to defray our debt?" I'm going, we've got a campaign to win.
Right.
So let's talk day after the election.
Yeah.
So speaking of the election, what is it now? Just over a week away. So does either candidate have an edge?
You know, it's hard to say. Dick and I were talking about the turnout so far. After 9 days of returns, there seems to be over 20,000 more voters than there were in the general election. So does that give an edge to anybody? Both candidates did well with the early voters. They do have a focus now. And, in terms of campaign money, certainly on the independent PAC side, you got to give the edge to Mike Johnston.
So, Dick, you wrote a column recently that was titled "The Missing Man in the Mayor's Race," which is current Mayor Michael Hancock. And we talked about that, I think, this past week. It is so interesting that neither Johnston nor Brough talk about him, good or bad.
No.
Really.
No.
I think that's unusual. What's up?
Well, I think so. Normally, or a lot of times in campaigns, there's an incumbent who's leaving office kind of at a low point or maybe even high point. Like Governor Roy Romer, when he left office, I can tell you the Democratic nominee that year for his job sure talked about him. But anyway, I don't think any of these candidates want to trash Mayor Hancock. And yet, nobody's embracing him either. And in fact, and nobody's really asked for his endorsement. And it was just funny to me, which is why I wrote the column. I just thought, it's like this guy doesn't exist. And it's just kind of funny to me.
Right,
So,
it is. I mean, you got any thoughts on that?
Well, when we talked about this last week, when your city's ranked 99, out of 150 as the best cities to live, there's not a lot to, attach yourself to. I do think that every mayor until this race that's been elected has, gotten a city on the uptick. And after the pandemic and everything that's out there, it's harder to be the gym that you want it to be.
Right. What they say, it's all in how you finish, right? Well, there are 3 city council seats that will also be decided June 6th in districts 8, 9, and 10. And every one of them pits a Democratic centrist against a Democratic socialist. So, we've talked about this as well on this show, I think, after the election. Dick, what does the outcome of these races say about the direction of this city?
I think in many ways, Shaun, this is actually more significant than the mayor's race. Because you look at Kelly and Mike, there's not that much difference between them. They're kind of
mainstream.
left of center, mainstream Democrats. But you know what? This is going to show just what direction the Democratic Party in Denver is going, and frankly, for the state of Colorado, because you've got some of this going on in the state legislature too. And so I'm going to really watch that closely that night, because if they sweep these seats, that Denver City Council is going to be a pain to whoever wins mayor, I think.
Yeah, and Mike, one of the races involves the incumbent, Candy Cedabaka, a polarizing figure, certainly to be sure. Does she hold on to her seat, you think?
Well, the key for her is the turnout. As we saw in the general election, Lisa Calderon had a huge surge in the last 2 days. Right. The Democratic Socialists are good at turning out voters. And she's kind of their lead candidate. So I got to believe that gives her an edge.
We'll see. Up next, 12 Colorado counties join a lawsuit challenging the property tax relief ballot measure. Why they say it's deceitful. Plus, Colorado congressional members weigh in on debt ceiling talks. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Left, Right, Center. Governor Polis signed a property tax relief bill into law this past week. It now goes on the November ballot as Proposition HH. Even before the bill became law, a conservative group, Advance Colorado, had filed a lawsuit saying the measure violates the state constitution's rule that ballot measures address one subject only. Proposition HH addresses property taxes and the Taxpayer Bill of Rights, or TABOR. The lawsuit also claims the ballot language isn't clear. It says, shall the state reduce property taxes for homes and businesses, including expanding property tax relief for seniors and backfill counties, water districts, fire districts, ambulance and hospital districts, and other local governments, and fund school districts by using a portion of the state surplus up to the Proposition HH cap as defined in this measure. So, Mike.
Oh, my.
Right.
Let's go to the next question. Debt ceiling. I'm ready to answer that one.
So, multiple choice. So, what the ballot measure calls state surplus, most of us call TABOR refunds. So, I guess the governor called it Colorado cash back, you know. Yeah. I have never seen a ballot measure that changes a tax rate that doesn't say by how much. You know, do you think the judge is going to say, hey, this needs some clarification here?
I think there's a good possibility. You know, they did this press conference at a gentleman's home in Commerce City. Right. I'm wondering if they tried to explain it to him and he understood it. I think the intentions are good here. The thing here is that this came at the end of the legislature, like we saw several other bills. Right. And they rush it.
I remember.
You know better than anybody. Yes. And that's frustrating. And I think that's one of the problems here, is that it just was rushed. The judge is going to be a determiner of saying, hey, maybe it's half cooked and got to go back to the drawing board.
They'd really like to see it. The group behind the lawsuit would like to see it split into two separate measures, because saying, hey, look, you know, the property tax relief, that's popular. You know, I don't know about this whole like taking TABOR refunds is kind of unpopular, and so you stick them together. So, Dick, even if voters don't like the measure, I gotta wonder, a lot are probably going to vote for this because they want some property tax relief. But what's interesting is the legislature can do property tax relief on its own. It's already done that. So if this fails, do you see them coming back for a special session?
Yes, I do, and I think it is going to fail, Shaun. I think voters can see through this. They normally can see through these kinds of complicated measures that really are deceitful, and I think this is deceitful. And Advanced Colorado will lead the campaign against it. I think there will be money against it. And my Lord, my head was spinning by the time you got done reading that. I thought, are they going to throw in playground equipment? Or it was getting so granular.
There is a renter's fund, I think, somewhere in there too. But
so anyway, yeah, I think, and in fact, I'm not even sure Advanced Colorado wants to win this lawsuit. Just put this thing on the ballot. I think it can be beat in its present form. I really do.
I don't know. Michael Fields with Advanced Colorado said they will be launching a big education campaign here. So, as of this taping, Congress still has not reached a deal to raise the debt ceiling. Treasury officials say the government might not be able to cover all of its payment obligations as soon as June 1st. I spoke to some of Colorado's congressional members. Congresswoman Brittany Pedersen told me she's part of a bipartisan caucus that has its own plan.
Process that we have laid out is really just trying to give us the time and the space and the third-party evaluation recommendations to look at this thoughtfully and come back with a plan after the next election.
The answer is not to say, well, we need to get past this default, and then somebody else will be in charge, somebody else will be in office, somebody else's problem. The very clear answer is we've got to address the spending issue at some point. We might as well do it now.
But you don't get your house in order by burning down the house, because then there's no house left, right? If you're going to destroy and blow up the economy, and hundreds of thousands of people are going to lose their jobs, businesses are going to close, drastic cuts to veterans' health care, that's no way to do this.
So, Dick, everyone says they're hopeful. All three of them that I talked to there say they're hopeful. But I don't know, where do you see the two sides coming together and reaching some sort of deal that can pass both chambers?
Well, only two people matter in this debate, President Biden and the Speaker of the House, McCarthy. And frankly, I think McCarthy has really outbested the president on this process. I think the president made a mistake by just basically not engaging early on. Meanwhile, McCarthy is marshaling through a debt limit with spending reductions through the House of Representatives. Democrats did not think he could do that. He did it, and now it sounds like the White House is accepting some spending reductions.
Right.
It sounds like, yes, and it sounds like that. And Democrats are not going to be pleased with President Biden, because I think this is where it's headed.
Mike, I think some congressional Democrats already are pleased with President Biden because, he's kind of played this whole thing close to the vest. And his advisors have said, look, he is the adult in the room, so he's not going to come out and talk about the negotiations. But I got to wonder, does either side really come out ahead on this in terms of public perception?
If they take it down to the wire, maybe even trip the wire. I mean, my advice is, not to look at your 401k for a week. Yeah. But we forget the president came out with his budget long before the Republicans passed their plan. And so the president had a plan. The Republicans passed an extreme plan. And now whatever they come up with has to go to the Republicans and the Democrats in the House, because McCarthy is not going to get all his Republicans next time. And so Brittany Pedersen, a bipartisan group, that's the right path.
We'll see. So Colorado Springs will hold an inauguration in the next week and a half for its first elected black mayor. Unaffiliated political newcomer Yemi Mobilati beat Republican Wayne Williams, a former Secretary of State, El Paso County Clerk, and Colorado Springs City Councilman. Dick, while most voters in the Springs are unaffiliated these days, there's still a lot of Republicans there. So what gives?
Well, there was an overwhelming advantage in who turned out with unaffiliated voters. And I think it was a couple of things. I think Yemi ran a great campaign. And then I think that there's some dissatisfaction and, frankly, some disgust in Colorado Springs right now with the Republican Party. It's just been a joke. And I don't think that was the main reason for Yemi's win, but it sure didn't help. And I hope that sent a message to the Republicans in El Paso County, not the Paul Lundins and the Rose Pugliese, and frankly the majority of the elected officials, but the people who run the Republican Party in El Paso County. They have been totally wrapped up in election conspiracies and that kind of stuff. And I just think that people are tired of it down there.
And rubbed off on Williams.
Yes, it did. I think it did.
Mike, what kind of changes do you expect under this new mayor, Yemi or Mobilati?
Yeah, well, I think unity. He talks about unity, unifying people. As an unaffiliated, he feels he can bring people together. Inclusiveness is a big one. He wants to bring a good culture to the city. He talks about meeting with all the city employees and saying, this is my vision, and so they understand it. And one of the more important things he'll work on right away, Space Command. Colorado Springs still wants that, to hold on to that, and that's going to be one of his top priorities. It's
interesting. We talk a lot on this show about how likability is such a huge factor in elections, and he is certainly a very likable
very much
person.
So.
Yeah. Thanks for watching Left, Right, Center. We'll see you next week.